Gravitas. Talk to me about what gravitas is. I still don't know what the definition is, and how somebody who's like me trying to figure it out, what do they need to do to get it?
That's such an important point because there are so many misconceptions around it. So let's start real quick with what gravitas is not.
Okay.
Gravitas does not mean grave
Okay.
in the hardcore serious. That's not it.
Welcome to the Vision to Reality podcast. I'm your host, Curtis L. Jenkins, and in each episode, I speak with industry experts, thought leaders, and innovators to break down the strategies, techniques, and methods that turn their ideas into reality. Whether your vision is to scale your business, build and lead a winning team, prepare for your next big career move, this podcast is for you. Let's get started and bring your vision to reality. Today, we're talking about communication secrets that get you hired and heard, something that can make a huge impact on your career. And to help us get right into this is Dr. Laura Sicola, who is a leadership, communication, and influence expert, speaker, and author of Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice, and the host of the Global Top 1% podcast, Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite, and the podcast Alpha Whisperers Genesis. Her mission is to transform executives into confident, inspiring leaders. A cognitive linguist, that's easy for me to say. By background, she has trained and coached executives at Fortune 500 companies and nonprofit leaders from around the world. Laura's TED Talk, Want to Sound Like a Leader? Start by Saying Your Name Right, has nearly 7 million views. Welcome, Dr. Laura. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Curtis. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So I just want to get right into your TED Talk, right? Tell me, why do you think 7 million people resonated with this talk?
I think it's because it's such a frequently experienced frustration of wondering why, we're not so good at remembering names in the first place, because that's the hook in the title. But at the same time, it's not just that piece. It's that we all want more influence. We all want to find our leadership voice that is powerful, that is acknowledged, and that is authentic as well as effective. And that's really what the focus of the talk is about in its entirety, finding that unique, authentic, and effective leadership voice.
And so why is that important for all of us, no matter where we are in our walks of life, to find that authentic voice?
I can't be you. That role's been taken.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
we have to find the best version of ourselves. You can try to be somebody else. You can try to act. You can try to imitate, and you can borrow and learn from somebody else and figure out some things that they're doing that are effective and make them your own. That's okay. But we really have to be true to ourselves in a way that allows us to be freely truthful with somebody else. And now, one thing that I think is an important point of distinction is the word authenticity is a bit of a buzzword nowadays that's gotten jargonized. So
Yeah.
let's take all the fluff and all the self-delusion out of it right away, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Yep.
Where authenticity does not mean unfiltered. I'm just going to tell you whatever is coming through my brain, in head, out mouth, tell you I'm just going to vent. That is not authentic. Authentic diplomacy is something that will take you very far because sure, you can pull the pin out of the grenade and throw it into the conversation and it might feel really good in that moment.
Yeah.
But there's going to be blowback from that. And in the long run, it is not going to get you where you want to go. So the real question is, how do I take what I need you to hear and understand and translate it, deliver it in a way that you can hear it, receive it, understand it, work with it and work with me, but in a way that is still me? That's the balance that we want to, that my job in everything that I do is helping people figure out where's that perfect balance.
I see. But Dr. Laura, you got it all together. I don't like.
If
I don't.
only that were the case.
Well, so I'm playing this role here, right?
Sure.
So you have it all together. I don't like my voice when I hear it. Well, I don't you tell me to smile, right? You tell me to what is it, PEGS,
Sure. Yes.
right?
PEG's a great acronym.
And you're gonna tell us what that acronym is, but I try all these things. I still don't like myself. What is wrong with me and what do I have to overcome?
Oh, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you. That's the
Okay.
most important thing to recognize. And what you need to overcome first and foremost is the self doubt that is brought on by the belief that there is something wrong with you. So I say this to all of my clients in a loving and semi facetious way. Your mother lied to you. You're not special. You're just like everybody else. We
Okay.
all struggle with these questions. We all struggle with how do I take my ideas and translate it to whoever that other person is in the moment, whether it's your sibling, your boss, the person you're interviewing with, a vendor or client. You're always translating for someone who has a different perspective from you. That's the nature of the beast. Now, as far as your voice is concerned, and mine's a little raspy getting over a cold, so I apologize for that. But think of it this way. In an orchestra, there are flutes and there are tubas, and there's everything in between. I can't change, and you can't change whether you were born with a tuba, a trumpet, a clarinet, or otherwise. But you do have complete control over learning how to master the instrument, learning how to play it. And most people just kind of pick it up like a 4-year-old and blow,
Okay.
and then are surprised that they don't like the way it sounds. But there are so many things that we can do with our voices, that we can do in the way that we use it, the way we play the instrument, that totally changes the way that the message is received, totally changes the impression that you make. Are you trying to come across as strong, as empathetic, as patient, as confident, well, you fill in the blank. The vast majority of the ability to project that impression, to establish that brand, that reputation, is going to be based on how you deliver your message vocally. It is all about mastering the instrument.
I see. And tell how does preparation play into this? Because I remember when I used to look at the former president of an organization that I had gotten elected to follow, and I watched how they commanded the room, and I kept talking to myself, that voice in my head, I can't do that. I can't do that. And then I started taking courses, and it seemed like it boiled down to I just have to be prepared. How important is that?
Well, some element of preparation is always important. Understanding who's your audience,
Yeah.
understanding what is your objective, understanding, have I looked through my talking points at all?
Yeah.
Or am I getting up there to completely wing it with 10 seconds worth of sidebar before you walk onto the stage going, who am I talking to again today? Who's here? That's obviously going to change your ability to connect with the audience. So now preparation, this is another one of those false binaries that we tend to impose upon ourselves. Like I'm authentic, I'm inauthentic, like it's a light switch. It is not. Similarly, preparation, most people look at it and say, well, I can either wing it and be natural and be authentic. Again, there's that misuse of that word,
Yes. Yes.
right? And speak extemporaneously off the cuff, etc. Or I can be quote unquote perfect and script it out and memorize it or read it and not deviate from the pre-selected words so that the script says exactly what I want it to say. That is not perfect. Let me tell you, that is a crutch. And that means, well, your message may be technically as accurate as you want it to be. I guarantee if you try to memorize or you try to read straight off of the paper, you will not connect with your audience because you're not even connecting with your own words. They're not going through your heart.
Right.
They're going into your eyeballs and out of your mouth and skipping the brain, skipping the heart. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Yeah.
Right. So
Wow.
you have to connect with what you're saying and connect with the audience in the process. So what's between those two extremes is simply preparation, consideration in advance. Who's the audience? What impact do I want to have on them? Where do I want them to participate? What impression do I want to make? There's so many questions in advance that can be thoughtfully considered and have some practice, some rehearsals, some preparation of different degrees, depending on what's at stake, but not utterly scripted and not totally winging it. That's not the definition of authenticity. That's lazy.
I see. So I want to take a little step back on this
Sure.
authenticity here, and I want to talk to the authentic Dr. Laura,
Yes.
right? And
And you
so
have been, but go ahead and shoot.
what I mean is I want to talk to the person before Dr. Laura was who she is today
Mm.
and the background. What brought you here and why are you so passionate about what you do?
I think I have always had an obsession with understanding and being understood. Even as a kid, I was so frustrated if I felt like, no, mom, you don't understand. Okay, why am I not being understood? And from the time that I was really little, my one grandmother was from Chile. And I remember at Christmas time, she'd come to visit and I'd hear her on the telephone talking with her siblings. I was raised only to speak English originally. So, but it was hearing her talk in what to me was this magic superpower secret code, which of course the rest of the world knows is Spanish. But to
Yeah.
me, it was the secret superpower. And just like she could blah, 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 make all these sounds and somebody else understood it. And then they'd say something back and she understood it. And it was, I hated being left out. It was like, but I want to understand too. And that I think was the first goal that I ever set for myself as a, I don't know, 6-year-old. Someday I'm going to know grandma's superpower. So I set myself a goal of learning Spanish effectively early, and that was my second language. And then it evolved from there and looking at, regardless of whether it's that kind of macro code switching, going from Spanish to English, or on much smaller micro levels, the ability to adapt what you say and how you say it so that others get it. They not only understand your content, they understand your intent.
Mm.
And that helps you get to yes faster. And of course, learning to listen more carefully on the receiving end as well brings you together. And that's the
Okay.
passion.
Okay. So a cognitive, so I think brain,
Hmm.
linguist, tongue. So it's all up
Yes.
in here.
Yes.
Explain what a cognitive linguist is and does.
Well, what this cognitive linguist is and
Yeah.
does, there are many who I'm sure do many other things with it. I'm going to use actually the analogy that you just made or the reference points. Okay, cognitive, your brain, linguist, your tongue, your mouth. I close the gap, the biggest gap in the world, and that's the 3 inches between your brain and your mouth. Have
Right.
you ever had those moments where you're talking to somebody and you suddenly go, okay, that sounded better in my head? Ever had one of those?
Absolutely.
And there's definitely times when we go, "Oh my gosh, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube," but
Yeah.
boy, would I give my left arm to be able to do so right now.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, when you're in business, when you're at work, the higher you are up the chain, the more is at stake based on the accuracy, the tone, the implication behind what you say. You have to be really, really careful to deliver that message well. That's where I come in. I've translated my background in that field into the world of executive coaching. So, working with business leaders, sometimes nonprofit leaders, who need to not just be the brains behind the operation, they have to be the face and the voice in front of it. People listen to what they say and make decisions and have feelings and reactions from there. There's a difference between following somebody who you view as your leader
Mhm.
personally,
Yep.
where you'd go into battle for them,
Yeah.
right? That you'd follow them heart, mind, body, and soul because of how they make you feel
Yes.
on some level versus somebody who's you recognize just as your boss. You
Yeah.
punch the clock, you cash the check, you check the boxes, you do your job, you follow them because you have to because they outrank you on the org chart.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience, isn't it?
It's a totally different experience. In fact, early on in my career, what I realized is I will not follow you if I didn't want to follow you into battle on the battlefield. And so I would not stay at a company when I didn't have that connection. And I would say within the last 20 years, I've been with the same person for over 3 companies because
Amazing.
that, quality of life matters, right? And
Yes.
knowing someone and knowing how you guys can work together. And so, yes, that is very, very important. I
Yes.
wanna touch on something that you mentioned about the gap between the brain and the tongue, and what I like to call, my intent was to do this, but the impact was that, and then I find myself in a
Mhm.
space of trying to apologize.
Mhm. And there's an art form unto itself is a good
Yeah, so
apology.
I wanted to talk about that because if I'm an executive leader or if I'm just a husband, like what are some of your tools and techniques to help overcome when you had that gap between intention and impact or your brain and your tongue?
I think you mentioned the two sides of the coin
Yeah,
that are of equal importance if it's going to be rectified, and
yeah,
that's intention and impact.
yeah,
Here's the challenge is that psychological safety is really important in building and, where necessary, rebuilding relationships when trust has been broken, when feelings have been hurt, when something has gone wrong. Most people, at least in this society, are very afraid to accept blame for hurt caused in whatever form or other if it can come back and bite them later and be used against them. And people don't want to see themselves as quote unquote bad people,
Mm,
nor do they want to encourage others to view them as bad people. There's a difference between shame and embarrassment, right? Embarrassment is I did something wrong or bad. Shame is I am
mm.
bad or wrong. It's about identity.
Yeah, interesting.
And because most people conflate the two, they're afraid that if I admit that I did something wrong, you're not going to look at what I did. You're going to hold it against me as a smirk, something on my character, and
Mm,
it will live out forever. So we are afraid frequently to apologize for something because that means we're accepting blame for it, unless I know first and foremost that I am safe, that I have the psychological safety because you understand I didn't mean to do it.
mm.
So you're going to forgive me for what it was because you know I'm not a bad person for it. As long as you know that it was a mistake and we can move past it, it's not going to be a black mark on my file for the rest of my life.
Mm, mm.
Then okay. So we tend to, looking at that two-sided coin, say, but I didn't mean to. I have a 9-year-old at home. Oh my gosh, the number of times I hear, but mommy, I didn't mean to do it. I understand. But you did it, and I need you to accept the responsibility for this. He's a whole other story. But a very good, excuse me, illustration of our deepest selves that really wants to come out as often as possible. But I didn't mean to. But the person who was hurt to whatever degree needs to feel like, yes, but I need you to recognize that you did hurt me. So it becomes this chicken game, this game of chicken, right? Who's going to flinch first?
Yeah.
And the reality is that, again, psychological safety is important, but often the apology needs to be clear from an ego-less standpoint to say, yes, maybe I didn't mean to hurt you, but I realize that I did. And I am so sorry that my choice, action, whatever else caused this effect on you. Again, I didn't mean to at all. It was never my intention. I would never want to hurt you, but the focus is on the fact that I did. And for that, I apologize. And that's where people, if they hear that the emphasis is more on acknowledgement of pain, then they're much more willing to receive the apology and acknowledge and absolve of intent at the same time. It's when you need me to have the empathy first, even though I'm the one that was hurt. That's where the walls go up.
Got it. Now, so I'm taking this in, right? And I feel like now I'm armed at home.
Okay.
If I'm at work, is it the same? Okay.
Yes. I mean, look, every situation is different. Who did you hurt in what way?
Yep.
How sincere does the apology come across?
Yep.
And what is the nature of the infraction? You can't tell me you didn't mean to embezzle $500,000. I'm not going
Yep.
to really buy that one. When you get into issues of language and discrimination or, off-color jokes or other things that, create the hostile workplace through microaggression, then it gets murky,
Yeah.
because there are those who are genuinely just obtuse
Yeah.
and don't realize that that joke might have been funny 20 years ago. It's not
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and they really don't mean it, and they don't realize it. So yes, there is stuff that we have to consider on, all fronts.
Got it. So on that vein, right, we're talking
Yes,
about leaders.
sure.
And in order for leaders to run a great company, they have to bring in great talent,
Yes.
right? And so part of what my series is talking about talent in the whole ecosphere, right? And so I
Mhm.
do want to stay on talking about hiring managers and how they communicate, but more importantly, I want to talk about where they stand when it comes to interviewing and when it comes to growing their people. Let's talk about interviewing and hiring managers. What
Sure.
are some of your tips so that they, one, don't offend people, but two, make sure that they bring out the best in the communication so that they can get a really good sense of whether this talent will fit into the culture?
I think number one, being upfront about what the culture is helpful for people to know what the expectations are. But it's also important to lead by example.
Hmm.
So if you want that person to feel comfortable and open up and talk more, then not And I don't want to make assumptions about the hiring manager in their interviewing skills necessarily, but I assume that if it's their job, that it's something that they're qualified for and experienced at and generally good at. But, personality wise, there's something called matching and mirroring,
Yep.
for example. So if you notice that the person that you are talking to is very kind of quiet and does not a lot of words and a little shyer perhaps, or at least very reserved personality, and you're a naturally super bubbly, effervescent person, you're going to overwhelm them. Take it down a
Sure.
notch or two. It's not being inauthentic. It's not imitating. It's not pretending to be them. You have a range of your natural abilities as well. Take it down a notch or two or maybe to go decaf that morning. Or on the flip side, if you are naturally somebody who's relatively stoic and only a few words, but you're talking to a candidate who seems a little more bubbly, who's a little more, you can tell there's some nervous energy going on. Maybe amp up yours a little bit, help them feel like you're enthusiastic to see them, not just that you're sitting there kind of with your glasses halfway down your nose, looking
Yeah.
over them and going, check,
All judgy.
check, check. Where's so it's like, okay, am I being interrogated or interviewed? There's a difference here, right? How do you warm up to that? How do you help that other person warm up to you a little bit? Get them to talk and feel comfortable. I think that's a really big part of your job. How do you get that person to feel comfortable? Because if they're not comfortable, they're most likely going to hold back something that's going to be relevant to you.
I interview people all the time, and I try to be unconventional in my interview in terms of checking the boxes, right?
Sure.
And I do want to pull out of them what it is that they can share with me about them because I am thinking about the culture. I'm thinking about my boss and others.
Mm.
And so when I ask questions, I'm trying to get them to give me something that I can sort of
Mhm.
continue to talk through. One of my biggest pet peeves, though, is not answering the question that I ask.
Mm.
And I will give you a second chance because I will say that maybe I just didn't ask it right.
Mm.
But some of the things that come back, and maybe it's cultural, it's the we. And I'm saying, tell me what you do, tell me what your role. We did this, we did that.
Yes.
Or if I ask you to speak to me, I'm a project manager by profession, to give me project management language and you don't, it starts to get frustrating, right? So what could you give me to help me pull things out? How can I do better questions? But to job seekers, what would you tell them to help with not answering the question that was asked? Because that's usually when I want to give up if I've tried several times.
There's so many layers
Yeah.
involved there, Curtis. It's a great to be able to dig into this. Let's look at the first one that you
Yep.
mentioned, the I versus we.
Yeah.
This is a sticking point for a lot of leaders because they have been conditioned, had it beaten into their heads for however many years, that a good leader doesn't talk about themselves. They give credit to the team, right? There's no I in team, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. Well, guess what? There is an I in leadership. So let's get past that.
I like
But
that. There is an I in leadership.
yes, and it's where the buck
Mm,
stops.
I'm just
Or
checking that to make sure I say that going forward. Go ahead.
well, and so people have to get out of their own way. And I do a lot of, I have a program called Quantum Leap where I am often helping people or I work with leaders who are in transition looking for the next job. So interviewing skills is a big part of what we work on. And that is one of the most common challenges that you ask them about a time when they had a big problem to solve or where there was a scenario that you're looking for. And they talk in terms of we, because they're saying, well, here's what we accomplish. I didn't do it by myself. And they really have to be consciously reminded, I understand that. What was your personal role and contribution in this? I get that you didn't do it single handedly. I'm perfectly aware. I'm going to give you that benefit of the doubt. But you had to make some decisions. You had people to pull together. A lot of them also, and tell me if this is right, for in your experience, Curtis, that when you're asking these questions and you're looking for these scenarios, you also want to know the thought process behind it, not just here was the problem, here's what we built, here
That's
was the
right.
solution, here was
That's
the
right.
result.
That's right.
Right. So these are not intuitive things to think about on a conscious level. They are used to thinking in terms of balance sheets, in terms of P&Ls.
Mhm.
They're not used to going back and reflectively, consciously articulating the thought processes
Mm.
that happen internally. So one of the things that I often have to really work on with them is the ability to say, well, I realized there were these two factions. There was this department and that department, and they had significantly competing primary interests. So, okay, how was I going to bring these two groups together?
Mhm.
I needed them to do, and that's the kind of, I mean, would that be fair as an example of the
That's a
kind of
very
information?
good example. And one of the things that I usually add on to
Mhm.
keep them from doing that, actions and results is what did you learn from it? Because what I want to hear is how are you different from when you started to
Mm,
when you finished? And I'm looking for people to articulate their growth.
I think that, and it may be personality. It
Yeah.
may be, somebody who's in your HR space may be more in tune with the ability to articulate those kinds of thoughts more easily than perhaps, and I'm grossly generalizing here, but I
Yep.
don't know, somebody in IT or in finance, somebody
Yep.
who's much happier in the spreadsheet and data world. So there is perhaps a need to ask the question, if you want to know how they brought different groups together and who had different opinions and resolved those kinds of conflicts, that may need for you to be more explicitly asked, where
Yeah.
to me it's obvious what's the question behind the question, not
Yeah.
just how did I get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I'm in a leadership role that I'm interviewing for. So who did I lead through the process? And
Right.
how did I lead them through the process of going from point A to point B? So if the question is asked more along those explicit lines, so people don't have to read between the lines and infer that, oh, those are the kinds of details you want. Well, otherwise they're more concerned about, did I build the product?
Got it.
Did I turn the company around? Did I increase revenue? Did I pull us out of the red and into the black? Those kinds of things. Because most people are technical experts.
Yep.
So it's, did my product
Yeah.
succeed? Did I meet my numbers? And if they're saying, actually, I don't really care about that, I'm more interested in this stuff around the numbers
Yeah.
and around the direction, they're going, oh, nobody ever asked me that before. Okay, let me start from scratch.
Yeah.
Think about it for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I just wanted to take a quick break to say thank you for tuning into the Vision to Reality podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to level up your business or career, I've got some great resources for you. To turn your business vision into reality, my book, Vision to Reality, Start Working, Start Living, is available now and filled with strategies to help you bring your goals to life. Plus, the companion Vision to Reality digital workbook is the perfect tool to guide you step by step through the process. You can grab both at curtisljenkins.com. And if you're preparing for your next job search, check out my book, The Only Job Search Book You Will Ever Need. This book uses proven marketing strategies that have been used for over 60 years to help you rise above competition to land your dream job. You can grab your copy at curtisljenkins.com. And I have great news. This book will be updated with a new version that includes recent impacts on the job search process, such as remote work, AI, government policy changes, and much more. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the conversation. So for me,
Please.
I need to do a better job of being more explicit around what exactly it is that I want, recognizing that in many cases I'm interviewing people who are technical in nature.
Mhm,
So there are ones and zeros, right?
mhm.
And I happen to be somebody who's not, but I had to work on it. I had to
Yep.
work on it. I actually am a 1 and 0. You should see me when I'm just like, get to the bottom line. Why
Mhm.
are we red? Why are we amber? And I'm
Yeah.
going right in. But what I want to do here is, okay, how do we in this conversation prepare the job seeker?
Mhm.
Right. So they're listening to this, they can hear this complaint or me pleading to you for some help. But what can they do? Some easy tips that'll help with better telling their story is the way I want to put it.
I think it's important to remember, if as a job seeker, if you are looking for a leadership role, even a management role
Yeah.
of some sort, where it's not just about what you produced. You're not coming into a role as an individual contributor. So in that particular scenario that you're being asked about, in a primary interest of the interviewer is typically understanding how you led people, who you led them through what and how, in order to get from point A to point B together and hopefully end up in a better place than you started, not just what was your starting point, what was your ending point, and what was the bridge that you built between them. So it's really understanding the interpersonal stuff. Talk me through your thought processes. Talk me through the questions that you had. Talk me through the personalities that in interests that you had to find a way to make them play nicely together in the sandbox. What was at stake? What were the sacrifices that groups were, or the compromises people were being asked to do? How'd you get them to say yes?
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
the pieces that are more interesting to read between the lines. And thus, of course, then for the interviewers themselves, I would encourage them, unless it's a, well, I mean, look, all interviews to an extent are tests.
Yep.
It's a
That's true.
test of fit. So if part of that test of fit is to see if they can come up with these answers on their own and understand that it's a natural part, it's a necessary part of leadership. So you should inherently be able to address those without me having to pull it out of you, then leave the question as it is. But if you realize people may not be naturally inclined towards thinking in those terms, but as long as they know them and can do them and have done it, then great, you'll help them tease out the story to get the details that you want, even if it's not naturally the first thing that rolls off of their tongue. Depends on how much you're willing to excavate that
Yeah.
line
Yeah.
versus if it just needs to be handed on a silver platter. And that's completely up to you.
Yep. Yep. Well, one of the things I do, especially with my contractors, I work with my partners that supply people. I actually give them questions to ask. One of my
Mm,
favorite questions to have them ask, I don't ask this at interviews, but I have this as practice,
mm,
is tell me what's your favorite thing to cook and eat. And tell me about the entire process from the time you come up with the menu, get the ingredients until you've served it.
mm,
And what I'm looking for is for people to just kind of get away from the, I guess, interviews, you can get real tight, right?
mm,
You're nervous and just naturally and authentically talk about that which you love in a way that you can train your mind into speaking in stories to
mm.
talk about yourself. This is really a question to you. Is that a good way to help train some people, or do you have any other tips and tricks that you would use so that people can train themselves not just to answer, problem, action, result, but articulate their story in a way that makes them more comfortable?
I think as a practice exercise, that's a fun one to
Yeah.
do because I'll often start with something that's not work related,
Yeah.
just so that you can work on connecting with the person that you're talking to, speaking from the heart rather than from the mental spreadsheet and prefrontal cortex kind of thing. Because most people don't want to cuddle up with a spreadsheet at the end of the day, but a few do. No judgment.
I'm guilty.
No, I'm definitely not. But the so the you may wanna have a version B
Mhm.
of that question because, of course, there are people who are like, "I don't cook.
Yeah,
Me and Uber Eats,
yeah,
we're like this."
yeah.
But otherwise, I eat 3 things. I eat cereal for breakfast, peanut butter for lunch, and mac and cheese for dinner unless I'm going out. That's it. So and they're like, "I hate cooking. I can't." So if you get somebody on that front, then they feel totally trapped. So if there's a version B, maybe give them 2 options. Would you rather answer like this version or that version? Tell me
Okay.
about, I don't know, shopping or a hobby or something they're good at, sport they played in high school, whatever. So just options so that the example doesn't cause more anxiety than the actual question would.
And there goes that intent and impact,
Yes,
because here
exactly.
I'm thinking that I'm helping with this option, and I really just potentially trapped somebody in who's not even a person that cooks.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I'm sure anybody that's watching that's been interviewed by me is saying, why didn't you talk to him about this earlier?
Sorry about that. And
That's
I
right.
totally appreciate the question because I love to cook. I love to eat. I'm a foodie. So anytime you want to talk food, I'm your gal. But I
You earned
also
it.
know that I've got friends who are like, oh my God, he asked me a cooking question. That wasn't supposed to be part of the job.
No, I like it. No, I appreciate that. So when we talk about people, and what I want to talk about what you do, but I want to talk about it through the lens of there was somebody that you helped that was rocket fuel for what you do. Your most touching story. Who was that person? And I don't know if you can say names or not, but just kind of walk me through that journey of how they elevated you to do more and more what you do, but this was the best thing you felt like you did one on one with a human being.
I won't use names
Okay.
because, confidentiality, of
Yep.
course, with
Yep.
clients.
Yep.
I'm blessed in that I have loved working with just about every client I've ever worked with. And we get those moments where you see the light bulb go off and major shifts happen. And one that comes to mind in particular was a senior leader, not top, but pretty close, Fortune 100 company. And she had been like, everybody loved her. She
Uh-huh.
was great at her job, had everybody's full trust, but got passed over more than once for a particular promotion
Uh,
and couldn't figure out why. And so the company brought me in to do some work and figure out, okay, what's sticking? Because the general assessment was that something's missing. It was this executive presence piece that they didn't quite put their finger on,
uh,
but that was the essence. So what we realized in working together was that when it came to talking to her peers or to her team, she was ideal. She was confident, she was direct, she was everything that you'd want your boss or your teammate to be.
uh-huh.
When she had to present to the senior leadership team, the powers that be, as it were, there were a number of things that she did that got in the way of her being viewed as one of us. Someone who sees what we need to see, who thinks like we need to think. And I don't mean groupthink. I mean,
No, I
understands
understand.
like the big strategic picture of
Yes.
our responsibilities at this level.
Yeah.
Um, and whatnot. She would, content wise, get lost in the weeds. Way
Mm,
too much detail, way too much data. People didn't need all that. They needed the, okay, so what do we do with it? What's your recommendation? Why is it relevant? This is our big goal. How does that influence how we get there? Those kinds of information. And of course, that would change how the entire presentation was set up, from the organization to the what's on this particular slide to how it gets delivered, all of that. And on the delivery side, one day I said to her, I know you've got a meeting coming up. I want you just, you'll be on Zoom or on Teams as you're doing it. Take your phone and just prop it up in front of on your screen and just video record yourself when you're delivering your presentation, and then go back and just watch a couple minutes. And let's just see what happens. And she did it, and she came back for our next session and she said, "Laura, I watched that video. I don't know who that woman was, but I would not have promoted her either."
mm,
And she said she realized that I felt like that woman was so nervous. She looked like she was going to cry. She was babbly and kept repeating herself. And she just did not come across as confident. No
uh-huh.
wonder. So, what we had to work on was figuring out, sure, it's natural to be nervous, to be a little intimidated when you're in front of the powers that be, as
Uh-huh.
it were. But what can we do authentically, not faking, not acting, to help her project greater confidence, not let her nerves get the better of her, and present that content that we'd reworked in a more executive way so that she would come across and connect with them in a way that allowed them to say, okay, maybe she is one of us. Maybe she's ready. And
Mm.
6 months later, she was ready and she got in. So these are the kinds of changes that we need to adjust: the words, the voice, the body language, the framing, all of that.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of being her.
Mm,
And when I grabbed your book, the first word that jumped out for me, like, you know how you look at words and you say,
yeah.
pick the first word, was gravitas.
Mm,
And for years, I've been chasing
mm,
this thing called gravitas.
mm.
And there were times when I'm told I have it, times when I don't have it. I'm just, again, I'm a kind of guy, got vision to reality. I'm trying to figure out, give me the steps to get to that gravitas, right?
Yeah.
And I still don't know if I have it. I do know that I'm at the table.
Mhm.
And one of the things I learned was, and I think you hit on it, was to speak the language that they speak. So I couldn't speak to the CFO because I was talking in projects.
Mm.
I wasn't speaking on the impact of the investment that was being made and the return on the investment and how that fit into the bigger picture for the
Yes.
major financial metrics that he was being measured by.
Yes.
It took me a while to figure that out.
Mm.
And that's when I was able to be at the table and have the conversation because there's a question that's asked of me. My natural reaction is to answer with the right detail, but sometimes I go, that's really not what they're asking. So recently I was asked about some projects and I just blurted out. I said, this set of projects will not affect the actual acquisition that we're about to do.
Mm,
And the meeting was over.
mm,
But if I'd answered the questions that was being asked of me, we'd
mm.
have been there. He would have been frustrated. So I get it.
Yeah.
But gravitas, talk to me about what gravitas is. I still don't know what the definition is, and how somebody who's like me trying to figure it out, what do they need to do to get it?
That's such an important point because there are so many misconceptions around it. So let's start real quick with what gravitas is not.
Okay.
Gravitas does not mean grave.
Okay.
In the hardcore serious blah, blah, blah. It's that's not it.
Okay.
There was a really great study that came out, and I still refer to it, 2013. So it was a little while ago, but still relevant, by the Center for Talent Innovation. And what they wanted to do was take the construct of executive presence and operationalize it. And there were three pillars, and gravitas was the primary pillar. And they broke it down, and they'd surveyed, I forget, CEOs across the US, something along those lines. And they broke it down into a bunch of behavioral characteristics, and it included things like, are you willing to stand for something even if it makes you unpopular, if it's the right thing to do? If you say, here's an ultimatum, if this happens, here's the consequence of a particular action, and that happens, do your words have teeth? Will you hold to it? Now you got to put your money where your mouth is, or do you kind of let somebody do backtrack it? Do you walk it back? Are you able to handle, is there grace under fire, grace under pressure? Someone asks you hard questions. Can you stand your ground? So there's a lot of different components. Will you go to bat for people,
Mhm.
even if there's nothing in it to gain for you?
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's a lot of those components that collectively make up the concept of gravitas. So it's not just one. So I would strongly recommend that people go back and look up the Center for Talent Innovation's report that came out in 2013 defining executive presence. Gravitas is in there. Now, another piece of that is that gravitas or executive presence does not have to mean physical dominance. It doesn't have to mean, loud and overpowering and stronger than anybody else. I mean, I have a strong voice when I'm not overcoming a cold, but people will meet me in person after they've seen me on video or, heard me on my podcast or something. And they immediately kind of do a double take up and down. And like, and I just go, you thought I was taller, didn't you? And they just burst out laughing. They're like, yeah, actually, I kind of did. Cause I'm a pipsqueak, I'm like 5 foot nothing, but
Yeah, I would have thought you were 7 feet, so
which is why I can't meet anybody in person anymore. I excuse me. I'll joke with certain clients, especially when they are, 6'4" men or whatever else. If we're meeting in person, I'll walk right up to them, sit there like, my nose is coming up to their sternum, just look up at them and be like, I'm not going to take your lunch money, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with physical size. And that's something I hear from women a lot. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, how am I supposed to build a executive presence? I'm 5'2" and 100 and whatever pounds. And, I'm just small and petite. And then I'll hear ethnic groups. Well, I'm Asian. I'm this. Stop. None of that has any bearing whatsoever because there are ways that you have to just adapt for groups. So, I am more extroverted. I am more of a stronger personality that way, but that's not how I establish authority. One example, and I'll give two real quick. I was emceeing an event, a charity fundraiser, an event. At the beginning, okay, everybody was mingling around doing their thing, and I got up to the podium and I just, welcomed everybody, said, okay, let's bring it in. You kind of worked on herding the cats, and I waited silently for a few moments. I just stood there, encouraged again, and within about 30 to 60 seconds, everybody had kind of come through, sat down, and we were able to kick off the event. At the end of the event, I spoke, the president of the organization came up to me and I said, so, what'd you think? How did it go? And she just said, that was masterful. I mean, you not only did this and that, but like in the beginning, you got up there and you asked them to sit down and be quiet, and they did it. I mean, she was just, of all things, I worked for 2.5 hours that night, but that was what was just mind boggling that I managed to just, through telepathy or something, as far as she
Yeah.
was concerned, get people to do that. On the separate side, totally opposite end of the spectrum, I guest lectured at a friend's college course at Temple University here in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And it was a class of undergrads, specifically a class of high school students,
Yeah.
inner city high school students who had this opportunity to take this class because they would get college credit for it. I polled in the beginning, not one student there took this class because they cared about the topic. They
Mm.
just wanted college credit and it was the only option. So if you
Yeah.
can imagine a bunch of 17-year-olds from the inner city who couldn't care less about the topic,
Right.
you can imagine the energy of the room, so to speak.
Yep. Yep.
And within, I don't know, within a minute or two, I'm chatting with the group and I see, the one kid sitting there just on his phone, doing whatever else. And so I just paused
Mhm.
and I stared at him.
Mhm.
I didn't say a word. And within, 5, 10 seconds, all of a sudden the other kids are near him are going, "Psst, dude, dude." And like he looked at them, like looked up at me, was like, "Oh," and he put his thing
Yeah.
down. I said, "Okay, let's talk about this. Everybody wants respect. Everybody wants influence. Let's dig into nonverbal communication and where it
Mhm.
begins."
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
talked about what that was. It was silent in
Yeah.
that room and things changed fast. And when we finished the whole class, I was not trying and I'm bringing this up because you said you got to be able to talk like them. I was not trying to talk like an inner city 17-year-old
Gotcha.
kid,
Gotcha.
right? That would
Gotcha.
not have flown. But I spoke to them on a level of we are equals and
Yeah.
I'm going to lay it down for you,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
right? This is as raw as it gets. I'm not chastising you for being on your phone. I'm not
Yeah.
scolding you. I'm not taking it away. But let's get real and real fast. And when we got done, they left. And my colleague, the class professor came, she's like, that was amazing. I
Yep.
have never seen them like that before. But it had nothing to do with me wielding power. It
Yep.
had nothing to do with me being physically big. It had nothing to do with me looking like them, some little white lady as far as they were concerned. They didn't know who I was. They hadn't read my book. They didn't care.
Right. Right.
Okay, but there's a different kind of gravitas. Does that
Yeah.
illustrate differently for you?
It does. I just got one more question on
Please.
it. Do I have to buy a nice suit and look like them in the boardroom or in the boardroom? So what I wear, does that matter?
Um,
And when I say what I wear, I'm not talking about somebody wearing a t-shirt. Somebody wore a t-shirt with a frumpy collar to an interview. I'm
mm,
talking about just business casual versus, if the whole group sort of wears three-piece suits. I'm exaggerating because nobody does that now, but basically somewhat looking homogeneous to fit in. Is that part of gravitas too? Is a question.
I will qualify the answer. And the fundamental answer is know your audience
Okay.
and adapt as necessary. So whether it's your physical countenance, your appearance, how you dress, etc., or your vocal and verbal appearance, how you show up and how you communicate what comes out of your mouth. If you think about your wardrobe,
Mhm.
you open your closet, you have a whole array
Mhm.
of options in there, right? You've got the tux, you've got the full suit,
Mhm.
you've got the business casual, you got the jeans, you got the sloppy shorts and
Mhm. Mhm.
gym stuff and whatever is your favorite comfy things at home. You've got all those different pieces, but they're all your version, right? You're not going to wear the same suit that somebody else wore just because they're wearing it.
Right.
I may wear a blazer if you're wearing a blazer, but mine's probably going to be a different color and it's definitely going to be a different cut
Yep.
and it's going to be a different style, etc. But if I'm going into an interview with senior bankers, heck yeah, I'm wearing a jacket
Yes.
and possibly a full suit, the one remaining one that's in my closet at this stage of life. But if I'm going to interview somewhere else where it's, a smaller nonprofit, very casual, whatever, I'm not going to show up in a suit and look stiff and out of place. They're going to think she doesn't really understand who we are. She didn't do any research into us. Where's she coming from? Uber corporate? Well, maybe there's already not a cultural fit if that's how she is. So understand if you're going to talk to the board and they do suits
Yeah.
or at least button down shirt and blazer without, sport coat or something without a tie, and that's their quote unquote uniform, then what's your version of that? Add
Yeah.
your own flair, add your own color, but recognize what's considered contextually appropriate and respectful for that. And then do your version of it.
Gotcha. And I'm thinking about that authenticity, right?
Mhm.
So, and you're not talking about being authentic and being ostentatiously authentic. You're saying your version of whatever the context or the uniform, so to speak, that people wear, but you still are you, not
Sure.
necessarily wearing somebody else's. Okay.
Right. No, I wouldn't try to be somebody else. It is really a matter of understanding what's contextually appropriate here. I mean, if
Yep.
you were going to a funeral,
Yep.
you're going to wear like your super loud bright red
Right.
NBA jersey, something or other. I mean, I suppose you could. Some places may not care,
Well,
but
I've seen it, but I understand.
right. But who is it, right? Where are you
Right.
going to go talk?
Right.
When you go and forget the funeral, but most people would agree that the way they talk to their grandparents, if their grandparents are still alive, is not quite the same way as how they talk to a bunch of friends at the bar.
That's right.
So is it that you're being inauthentic in one context and authentic in another?
Oh,
Probably not. Right. You just
yeah.
recognize, no, no, no. With grandma, I probably should keep the four-letter words at bay if I don't want her at 96 and me at 52 or whatever to like haul off and smack me across the mouth. It's not appropriate. But if I'm watching the football game with my friends at the bar, that's sanctioned. Right. So it's just understanding contextually how do we need to adapt so that they see and hear what we need them to see and hear of us and not get distracted by something else?
Got it.
I wear the red jersey to a job interview where they're wearing suits. They're not going to hear a word I say because all they're
No.
going to be staring at is that bright red sports jersey.
And talking about it later.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That will be what they remember of you.
Yep. All right. So you knew you were going to come here and speak with me today, and I asked you some questions. But before we sort of wrap up, what I do want to ask is a couple of questions. The first one is, what didn't I ask you, or what is something that you would want to share that we didn't cover that you think is very important?
Let's go back to the authentic, inauthentic, non dichotomy, right?
Yeah.
This spectrum.
Yeah.
So, where for many people, I may hear something like, well, I have a reputation of coming across as being too aggressive,
Mhm.
but I tried being nice and that didn't work. So, what am I supposed to do? Right? Those false binaries that we impose on ourselves. The analogy that I like to use that shows you don't have to make massive changes or pretend to not be you is everybody in their brain, in their communications center, has a DJ's mixing board. The question is,
That's a
how do you identify all the levers and all the knobs and dials on that mixing board? It's not just a giant power switch, right? You got the reverb, you got the treble, you got a little of this and that, and you don't have to turn it on or off. You can move it from a 4.2 to a 4.6. So maybe for this particular audience, you just need to slow your pace down
okay.
just a little bit. Or maybe you need to use a few less jargon vocabulary words here. Just talk quote unquote normal instead of trying to sound smart by using lots of big words. Maybe it's just a little less detail. And oh, yeah, don't forget to talk, I don't know, use a feeling or an emotion word. It may not be your default, but I bet you have at least a couple of those words in your vocabulary. Dig them out. So those are the little levers on your board. It's usually the nuances that make the difference.
That's interesting. I'm gonna tell you why.
Please.
One of my goals is to always broaden my lexicon.
Mm.
Right? I just feel like I'll be a better speaker if I broaden my lexicons. I speak to people like yourself. Well, actually, I'm gonna put you in a different category because you just mastered speaking. But I talk to people that they're so eloquent with their words, right? And they say words, and I go, "Wow, what made them say that word in this moment? That's a good one. Let me write that down and put it into my lexicon." But I'm also hearing, and this is what I think I'm hearing from you. Simple is better. Simple is better. Simple connects better, and it just makes you come across better. So, do I have that right?
100%. Here's why. There's a great two good quotes. One was Einstein, who
Yeah.
said, if you can't explain it simply, you
Yeah.
don't understand it well enough.
Right.
And I think it was Mark Twain who wrote, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. Because we tend to think aloud
Yeah.
and work through stuff as we are hearing it come out.
Yeah.
But can you get to the point and make it simple? Here's the eh, where it's a challenge and utterly counterintuitive, but incredibly powerful if you can master it. And that is that when nervous, when a lot's at stake, when we're trying to make a good impression, all that kind of stuff, our default brain, our little lizard brain, kicks in and says, quick, prove that you're smart. Okay,
Mm.
how do I prove that I'm smart? I'm going to use a lot of big words. I'm going to go into my strong suit and use as much data as possible and try to come across as someone who, gee, they sound really smart. I don't know what they said, but they sounded smart. Check. That's where we usually land. The best way again, totally counterintuitive, to make someone believe that you're smart is to make them feel smart by making your point so crystal clear, so simple, not simplistic, not reductive, but so crystal clear and simple that they go, got it. Makes sense. Thanks. If you can do that, they will think you are brilliant.
Awesome. Wow. This was such a wonderful conversation. I mean, you have given us so much to think about. So I want to thank you for sharing your insights today. But before we go, can you tell us about how to connect with you and what do you have going on? How do we get more of you?
How do we get more? I'm always up for more. The easiest way is on my website. It's laurasicola.com. Not very cryptic. So hopefully everybody can find that. Also, of course, welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do, please tell me that you heard our conversation here on the podcast. Would love to know that and would, of course, be happy to relay it to you, Curtis. But come to the website, check it out, drop me a line in the contact page, and would love to connect.
And do you have anything coming up?
As far as events are
Yeah.
concerned, or no particular events that are publicly available?
Okay.
But
So
thank you.
look, we'll just make sure we connect with you. We'll put all your links in the show notes. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And to everybody that's listening, continue to make your visions turn into realities. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. A huge thank you to today's guests. You can find all of their contact information in any resources mentioned in the show notes below. Also, can you do me a big favor? If you found today's conversation valuable, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment and a review, and share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from the information shared today. And remember, vision without action is just a dream. Let's turn those big ideas into reality. I'll see you in the next episode.